Hello, my galactic quasars. This is Shade of a Hero by Creator of the Mind, read by Supernova Podfix. Summary: The Radiance was defeated. They had done it without killing their sibling. They were still free. Just as they were about to leave, got home, and be rid of this for good, something grabbed them and dragged them down, down, down. And then they were no longer ghosts. They were no longer a vessel. Chapter 1. Prologue. If someone was asked to describe Midoriya Izuku, they would simply call him quiet. It wasn't that he couldn't talk, it was just that he didn't. When asked about it, he simply said that it was uncomfortable. If a person was pressed, they might glance around as if scanning for any eavesdroppers, and lean in and whisper that while he may seem unassuming, something was wrong with that Midoriya boy. It's like he's looking into my soul. If he had a quirk, that might have explained the uneasy feeling people would get around him, but he had none. Some would deny any fear they had towards the boy under disdain. If I was its mother, I would have gotten rid of the useless thing by now. However, you could always tell by looking into their eyes that it wasn't just his quirklessness that would have driven them to such actions. The children in his class held the same fear that the parents held towards the boy. They just didn't understand it. After all, what was there to fear of the pathetic little Deku? Nothing. They had decided as they continued on with their persecution of him, while an instinct they couldn't name screamed at them to get away from the obvious threat. On the other hand, if one was to ask the Midoriya's neighbor, Mrs. Nakamura, she would smile at you kindly, her wrinkles crinkling around her eyes, and tell you how kind the young boy was. He always helps me with my groceries and assists me around the house with some of the chores that are harder on me. I have to see him bringing fresh water out for the bugs. He seems to have a way with them. She often felt, like everyone does, that the boy was staring into her soul. However, she always felt comforted whenever it happened, as if he was wrapping his very being around hers to keep her safe. It was an odd feeling, but not an unwelcome one. If his mother was asked, she would only give a sad smile and say he was far too kind for someone who lived in a world like this, with aspirations too high and a seeming lack of self-preservation. Shaking her head, she would jokingly say how he's going to make me go great 10 years too early. Still, there was a pained look in her eye as she looks to her son sitting by himself in the park, carefully picking up bugs and letting them crawl on him. If during moments like this she is pressed, she would say that he scares her. He's too smart for his age and does things that no normal child should. I'm afraid that one day I'm going to get called to identify a body, and it will be him. I'm afraid I won't have my baby anymore. She will then shake herself out of her thoughts and apologize for being morbid before abruptly leaving. Indeed, Midoriya Izuku was odd, but many would never realize to what extent that went. Chapter 2. Rough Start. Summary. Poor Izuku has a tough school life. Midoriya Izuku had been bullied from a young age. His only friend had abandoned him as soon as he learned Izuku was quirkless. Though he didn't care, it wasn't like he could feel he was hollow, after all. He could, and it hurt. Why did he always have to be alone? Why did everyone leave him? Why? Why? He was fine. Arriving at school was always an interesting affair. The first day he had gotten the pretty flower on his desk, he hadn't known what it meant. That was rectified when the second he had sat down at his desk. It didn't matter what it had meant, though. He didn't care. Why was I bad? Did I not do a good enough job? Do I not deserve to be happy? Why do they hate me? He was fine. Today was a day that should have been like all the others. He should have gone to school and gone through the motions of caring. He would have been roughed up a bit by his classmates, and that would be that. But that is not how his day went. It started off normally enough. He went to school, was mocked, had lunch, and was mocked, but at the tail end of the day, the teacher started talking about future careers. Now, today we're going to be talking about what you all want your future career to be, the teacher calmly said before his face split into a grin. Who are we kidding? We all know you want to be heroes. This was met with cheering from the class before a resounding boom echoed around the room. Listen up, extras. I'm going to be the only one from this shitty school who's gonna be a hero, so you all better give up now, a rough voice shouted over the cacophonous sounds of their classmates. Yes, Mr. Bakugo, the teacher soothed. You applied for UA, correct? Obviously, Bakugo huffed. Where else would someone as awesome as me apply? And Mr. Midoriya, you applied for UA, didn't you? The teacher turned on him with a sneer on his face. At his question, the class once again filled with noise. But this time, it wasn't cheering. The quirkless loser wants to go to UA? One of his classmates shouted with a cold laugh. What's he gonna do? Cry his way in? The rest of the class continued making similar comments before another resounding boom quieted them again. Listen here, you pathetic Deku, Bakugo growled out. I'm going to be the only one going to UA, and a useless loser like you isn't going to stop me. This proclamation was met with a blank stare from Izuku. Bakugo slammed his hand down on the desk, smoke filtering through his fingers. Just keep in mind, nobody would want a broken freak like you. All right, no quirks in class, the teacher said, causing Bakugo to give a sneer at Izuku before turning back to his desk with a huff. After that, the rest of the class managed to pass relatively peacefully before the school bell rang, signaling the students to leave. After the teacher left, Bakugo stalked over to Izuku and snatched the notebook that was on his desk and leafed through it. It's really pathetic to see you try and play the hero, Deku, he said, baring his teeth. What is this, anyway? He asked, holding up the book by one of its sides as the pages fluttered slowly closed with brief flashes of sketched lines as the pages fell. Biting his lip, Izuku gave out a quick, hushed map. Bakugo let out a cruel laugh, joined in by his posse. And you think that's going to help you be a hero? He sneered. You're fucking pathetic. He then lit his hand with an explosion, charging the book before throwing it out the window. I have an idea. Why don't you take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in the next life? With a last round of cold laughter, he left with his groupies in tow. Izuku walked over to the window, looking down at the drowned notebook. If he had the capacity to feel emotion, he would probably be feeling angry right now. But he didn't. Chapter 3. An Encounter. Summary. All Might has an encounter with what might be a cryptid. The book was ruined. Maybe he could salvage most of it, but he wouldn't be able to write in it anymore, and he wouldn't have enough money to buy another until next month. Staring down at the dripping pages as the ink slowly started to run down them until they hit the crisp edges and fell, he sighed. If only he had his former money stash. Oh, well, it's not like he cared. Why did Bakugo always have to do this? Why did he have to ruin his life? What had he ever done to him? Picking up the sodden notebook, he began on his regular trek home. If he was lucky, he might find some spare change that he could use to buy another. Usually, he would try to take a slightly differing route so he could add to his maps, but considering what happened, that wouldn't be a possibility. So he decided to take the shortest route home for efficiency. Slowly walking through the tight space this path took him, though, he froze. Tensing up, he swiftly cast his eyes around for a suitable weapon before spotting a crowbar and lunging for it just as the manhole blew off and a giant wall of green slime filled the small space. Giant bulging eyes met his as soon as he snatched up the crowbar and a grotesque mouth split into a crooked grin. You'll make a perfect skin suit. Then it plunged. Just as quickly, Izuku brought up the crowbar and smacked hard into the prominent weak spot of its eyes. Letting out a howl of pain, the sledge jerked back, giving him another opening to attack. Just as he was about to strike again, a loud voice echoed through the area. No need to fear, young man. I am here. The appearance of the figure caused the villain to let out a swear before trying to run, to no avail. All Might had already moved and gave his signature Texas Smash, flinging the villain back and scattering the sludge. After All Might Straightened, he turned to face Izuku, but he was already starting on his way home again. "Young man, where are you going?" Izuku cocked his head and gestured vaguely to the direction he was walking before continuing on his way. All Might stood there flabbergasted. Usually kids were excited when they met him, yet this kid wasn't. Something felt incredibly off about him. Well, he didn't have time to think about that now. He had to get this villain to the police station before his time ran out. Collecting the sludge into some bottles, he spotted a soaked notebook on the ground. Midoriya Izuku. Huh, he thought. Must be the kids. Picking it up, he decided he'd get it back to the kid and maybe buy a new one, because this one was obviously ruined by the villain. After collecting the sludge, he started on his way to the police station, though he couldn't help but feel as if something was watching him all the way there. Chapter 4. Nighttime Terror. Summary. Aizawa encounters the god of void. A soft breeze swept through the night air, the sweet scent of summer weaving around the air. All in all, it was a beautiful night. For everyone else, Aizawa Shoto was not everyone else, because tonight he was running on fumes after only getting 2 hours of sleep and having fought several groups of thugs. In a word, he was exhausted. The only thing he wanted was to get back to his house and pass out, preferably on his bed. But he would take whatever he could get, which is why running into a child on the top of an apartment complex was possibly the worst thing that could have happened. The kid was short, maybe not even 5 feet, and seeing him standing on the ledge of such a tall building was concerning. Swinging over using his capture weapon, he landed softly next to the kid. The kid gave him a brief nod of acknowledgement, never taking his eyes away from the city. "What are you doing, kid? You know you're not supposed to be up here," he said. Izuku lifted his hands before signing a quick, "Watching." Watching for what? The kid seemed to start moving his hands before pausing, tilting his head and shrugging. "Well, whatever it is, you should get back to your house. It's late." In a bit, the kid signed. "Well then," he said as he sat himself down on the ledge next to the kid. "Guess I'll wait with you until you go inside." The kid made no objection, and he sat in silence for several more minutes before the kid finally turned away from his staring and turned his gaze to Aizawa. His eyes were a piercing green that seemed to peer into his very soul. Aizawa froze, feeling as if any movement would lead to his death. The kid, the thing, held up his hands and signed a quick "thank you" before turning away and leaving through the door. Getting up on slightly shaky legs, Aizawa rushed home. The moment he closed the door, whatever trance he was under shattered and he collapsed to the floor. The next morning, he woke up in his bed feeling incredibly well rested. He couldn't help but wonder if the whole thing even happened. Chapter 5. Waiting. Summary. The Shade Lord waits and ponders. Every night, for as long as they had been able to, during the darkest parts of the night, the Shade Lord would emerge. They quietly get out of their bed and make their way to the roof to watch and wait, waiting for the convergence of two realities, this one and Hallownest, the one that would inevitably come. Though it didn't matter if they were outside when it happened, because they would be able to feel it wherever they were. The Shade Lord wanted to see the convergence with their own eyes. The colors on the spectrum only they could see would whirl and combine until settling into one thing, and so every night they would wait. However, something had changed. On a night like many others, the Shade Lord was on the roof, but unlike other nights, they wouldn't be alone long. A figure approached and conversed with them. The conversation was short and one-sided, but even when they had finished talking, the man did not leave until he went back inside. That was the last they expected to see of the strange man, but on the next night, the man was back again. Instead of trying to talk with them, the man just joined them in their waiting, in silence. The next day, the man returned, and the night after that, and continued on in the same fashion for the rest of the summer. On some days, he brought small pieces of candy that he offered to them. Then, the week before the UA entrance exam, the man didn't come. It could have been a coincidence, but the Shade Lord knew better. Letting out a hum, the Shade Lord watched, as they always did. Though through the time the man had joined them, Ghost had slowly become more aware of these nightly sessions, more willing to acknowledge that they had happened. This was good, the Shade Lord decided. Ghosts needed to let themselves truly feel in a way that they had been denying themselves since the defeat of the Radiance and coming to this world. They needed to let themselves combine with the Shade Lord, because no matter how much they denied that they were the Shade Lord just wasn't them yet. Chapter 6: A completely normal entrance exam. UA was big, though that was to be expected for a big hero school. Carefully making his way through the crowd, he continued towards the entrance of the looming building. Hundreds of other students crowded him from all sides as they funneled through the door and made their way through the halls. Finally, he managed to make it to the auditorium where the entrance exam would be explained. He slipped into the back, settled into a seat, and watched the rest of the students make their way in. Finally, everyone had shuffled their way in and taken their seats and were just waiting for instructions. The person who was presenting the exam, a pro hero probably, but Izuku didn't really keep up with them, was incredibly loud. His voice echoed around the auditorium as he explained the whole thing. There were robots they had to destroy, and the harder they were to destroy, the more points they were worth. It seemed simple enough to him. The written portion was rather straightforward, as one would expect. After the students got done with the first part of the exam, they were led to their separate testing facilities for the practical. The students in Izuku's group were mingling around the giant double doors. Some were stretching, others were standing alert in front of the group waiting for the call, and there were others still that seemed to be lax and uncaring. Izuku's eyes filtered across the other participants before making their way back to the double door. Quietly, he shifted through the crowd to make his way to the front. After several more minutes of waiting, a voice rang over the speakers, saying one single word: "Go!" The doors swung open. Immediately, Izuku darted through. The loud voice said something else, but at this point, Izuku was too focused on his current task. A quick once-over of the fake building and streets, Izuku spotted what he was looking for. Leaning against a trash can was a crowbar. Quickly snatching it up, he immediately rounded on a robot that was making its way over to him. A swift blow to its exposed joint and its arm fell off. Another blow, straight to the gleaming red eye, and the robot was down. For the next few minutes, this was the pattern Izuku followed as he tore his way through the horde of robots until, out of the corner of his eye, he saw one of the robots sneaking behind one of the participants while they were distracted taking down their current robot. A split-second decision, and Izuku took off towards them, launching himself onto the robot that the other person was currently taking on, and flipping off of it, he landed on the one that was behind them and leveraged his crowbar under the thing's head before pulling it off. In another flip, he was on the ground, running again. Several minutes passed in a whirl of assisting other participants by defending them, saving them from falling debris, and taking down robots that were blindsiding them, or he was decimating robots of his own. Before long, the 1-minute warning had been given, and with it came a rumbling that shook the entire complex. It appeared that the distraction robot had arrived. It was huge. They wanted to fight it so bad. They could beat it. They knew they could. They had beaten the Radiants. They could take down a measly robot, and oh, did they want to. It appeared that he better get going in the other direction. After all, it would take up far too much of his time, and it would be worthless to try and fight it. It would be fun, though. It really would be. They hadn't had a good fight in such a long time. Everything was so boring here. As he was turning around to join the others, he spotted someone stuck under a large chunk of rubble that was right in the robot's path. An excuse? Also someone they should help, but the school wouldn't let anyone die. Probably. So making his turn at 360, he sprinted towards the girl that was stuck under the rubble and stuck his crowbar under the large piece that was holding her down. Using a rock as the fulcrum, he leveraged it off her and pulled her out. Once he was sure she was fully out, he swiveled to face the 0 pointer. Running at it, using several large chunks of debris to get higher, he jumped on the low-hanging hand and climbed his way up the arm to the shoulder. The gap between the head and body was big enough for him to shimmy into. Once in, he quickly got to work dismantling the supports and wires. After a handful of seconds, he had done enough damage to break the thing. Coming out of the gap, he was about to go down and try to collect some more points when a call for the end came from the speakers. After getting down, he was met with wide eyes from the girl he had saved. That was so cool. How did you do it? A bit taken aback with the positive attention, he gave a hesitant shrug before another voice broke the girl's continued praises. That was incredibly reckless, young man, an old woman in a nurse outfit said. Taking his arm, she brought him closer to her scrutinizing gaze. A few seconds later, she appeared to be satisfied. Some minor scrapes and bruises, but nothing major. You'll be fine. Placing a kiss on his cheek, she let him go. Now leave. I have other patients to attend to. This order got no argument from Izuku, and he made his way out of the facility and off campus. While he was walking home, he did chastise himself for taking on the zero-pointer. It was not at all necessary, and really just wasted time he could have spent gathering more points. It was fun, though.